the unmute and lead us in a word of prayer. Kakila, or we can have from St. Mary's Assumpta. Can we have from St. Mary's Assumpta or Kakila? Mary Assumpta, unmute. Okay, yes, Kakila, you can start. Kakila? Kakila, you can go on. And okay, I think we are failing to get from Kakila, but we can start with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for bringing us together. We ask you that all what we are going to discuss in this session may be of great hope, and that you may help us to succeed in whatever we are going to do, and that you may help us understand everything we are going to be learning this session. Make this through Christ our Lord. Would like to welcome everyone that is joining this call, and allow me to welcome Teacher Flavia to start off with the discussion. Teacher Flavia, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kaziba, thank you very much. And to all those that are online, we want to welcome you. Thank you for making the time to come. I'm also hoping that the failure to pray was because of the network and maybe other challenges, but not unwilling to pray in particular. We need to know very well that prayer helps us to go a mileage in everything that we do. So thank you, Mr. Kaziba, for taking that opportunity to pray with us. I would like to do a small recap of the last time when we were together. And we looked at a number of things. If I was to give you an opportunity to speak about what we had the previous time, I'm sure each one of us had something that we were able to record and to remember and be able to carry along with us. I think one of the most important things is that we have learned over time that it is important for us to be able
Sorry, I'm trying to, I think Teacher Flavia has got a challenge. So kindly let's be patient as she gets back. Let's just be patient as she gets back. I'm trying to look for her to see that she comes back and she takes us through. Let's be patient. I'm trying to get to her, but today we are looking at economics and we are going to have a discussion.
I'm very sorry. Network has a hiccup today, but the good spot has a big meeting happening. I wasn't able to get it. I hope I am still on and we can proceed. Very sorry about that. Mr. Kaziwa, can you hear me?
Yes, you are very clear, Teacher Flavia.
Oh, great, that is great. I just need to load again the document, but it will be in a short while. Okay. Very well. Okay. Very good. So let's continue and we'll start off today with some study tips. And in our very first study tips, we are saying that it is very important for us to, first of all, attend classes and also take class notes. And I know, especially in the new curriculum, we already have registered students that do not want to copy notes and they think that this is a free time. But it is so important for you to actually make notes. Make your notes and then later on, reference with the textbooks and top up your notes. You will understand better that way. Doing personal study and revision is very, very, very important. Having group discussions and memorizing of key terms, concepts, and details of topics is also equally important. Last week, I remember we talked about some questions that may appear different because of the different terminologies. For example, the word uses, significance, and purpose may actually mean the same thing, but may actually successfully intimidate a student. If the student has been used to, for example, has read and has gone through previous years' examination and sample questions, and most of those presented as what is the purpose of a national budget. And in this particular year, if it came as what's the significance of a national budget, that same student may actually fail to do the question because of the words, because of the keyword that has been used. So it's very, very important for us to be able to understand key terminologies. And this comes through discussions, because when one head is put together with another head, then we are all told that the aggregate of it is very, very significant. Sit around me. The aggregate of it is very significant. So revising is very important. So students therefore need to revise economics on a daily basis. Make it a point to have your timetable filled up with a study portion. It's very important because the subject topics, key terms and concepts need constant reviewing. Like we said in the last presentation, that our theory in paper 1 is going to be examined in its practical form in paper 2. So the practicality of it may not be easy for you to understand. Why? Because you have not engaged with the market forces. For someone who is probably taking on A-level as a mature student, they probably have a better opportunity to understand economics because they are practicing economics almost on a daily. But it becomes very difficult for a student to conceptualize these concepts and put them into real life. And that is because they have not gone out into the market spaces. So what helps you is putting one head and another, and we all know that 2 heads are better than 1. The saying that goes like that is very true. In discussions, you're able to learn so much more. Some students who are exposed to business already are able to explain certain things clearly, and you're able to grab them. So economics on a daily basis is very, very important. Key terms and concepts need constant reviewing. Otherwise, without that, revising economics becomes very difficult and tedious for students, because remember, it's a discipline that you meet for the first time in A-level. It's not connected at all to any other that you have probably done at O-level. Maybe a little bit of entrepreneurship in the new curriculum, maybe a little bit of commerce, but even those 2 disciplines are actually very different. So constant revision is very important. Don't think about revising economics when you are going for an exam. You may not be successful. So last week we talked about the structure of the examination, and we talked a little bit about paper 1 and paper 2. We are building onto that same knowledge, and we are saying there are 2 examinable papers. There's paper 1 and there's also paper 2. The duration of each is 3 hours, and each paper has 2 sections, A and B. Section A is compulsory and it carries 20 marks, while section B has 80 marks and it's made up of essay questions. 6 questions are set and the candidate is expected to answer only 4. Each question carries 20 marks. I am joined today with the team from Comprehensive College Itetika who are attending the class as we make the presentation. So we're now going to look at section A questions, and we shall say that in section A, and we will have some questions that we can look at as examples, which we shall interact with. And feel free to carry the lessons that you carry from these questions into another scenario, another question. The same principles apply to the different questions that you will find out there. So these sample questions have been carefully picked out and selected so that you are able to refer to them in any other presentation. Now, the very first sample question we have today is distinguish between intermediate goods and capital goods. And that is one of the first 2 or 3 topics that we get to do in our senior 5, looking at the different features of products and how they present themselves and how they behave and respond to the different forces in the marketplace. How do they respond to supply? How do they respond to demand? How do they respond when there's a change in price? How do they respond when there's a change in raw material? So I hope it is big enough. I can try to enlarge whether that would be good enough. Now, first of all, when they ask a question like this to distinguish between intermediate goods and capital goods, the expectation from your setter is that you understand and you can define intermediate goods, and you can also define capital goods. Sindio? Yes, you need to be able to understand and define those different goods. So first of all, we start off by defining, because remember, we said it's important for you to know how to define these economic concepts. You're able to state the statement, you're able to state the point, and you're able to define or write briefly in explanation about the point that you have set. So in this place, we are looking at a definition of intermediate goods. These are semi-processed, semi-finished goods that are used in producing the final goods. That's very, very important, and it would be good for you to probably give an example at this point. So an intermediate good, I know that you have some of those examples semi-processed, and you're able to use them finally to do the final goods, okay? It alone as a product does not give you the final commodity. So that's why it is intermediate, in the middle. It's in the process, it's work in progress. While capital goods are goods that are used in the production of other goods. And capital goods may be machinery, those different equipment that we use to fix materials or to fix products that are very durable. For example, you can have machinery in this particular example. Okay, that's very, very important. When you're making cakes, there are certain other products that you can also use that now help you to finally get to the final product, which is the cake. Those are intermediate goods. Now, again, I will take you back. I'll stay there a little bit. It's important for you to understand the different types of goods. And you may have about 8 or about there, different types of goods. Each one of them is distinguished because of the way it responds to the market forces. That is how you are able to define them. Hopefully we'll be able to look at some more examples a little bit ahead of how these features really play out. For example, in increase in prices, some of them respond with elastic demand, others respond with inelastic demand. And which are those, the features of those products are the ones that give them that kind of response. So we will look at some in the later slides. Give 2 examples of intermediate goods. So we have steel, we have sugar. Okay, we give 2 examples of intermediate goods. And here we have steel that can be used to finish up, and you have good steel windows. It alone as steel does not, if you had steel and you said this is a product that helps to make windows, but you don't use it to finally get to the final product, you don't actually have the product. So it is on its work in progress. It is on the way to your final product. Sugar, we talked about sugar, we talked about wheat flour. Those are intermediate goods that help you now make a product, which could be chapati, it could be cake. So that's a final product. You can't eat sugar and you eat wheat flour alone and then you say you're eating cake. That is still raw and we are work in progress. Cotton lint helps you to make clothes. It alone cannot be worn as a fabric. So those are intermediate goods. They're on your way. They're on your way to your final product. Again, we are also looking at more examples here that talk about intermediate goods. Define the term price is another question that can come. You remember we have had part 1, part 2, part 3. Some of these questions can actually be in that order. And there you're able to explain what price is. We all have probably had an experience with what price is: an exchange of value. Price is the exchange value of a product expressed in money terms in a given period of time. Now, these are very important. You're supposed to understand the particular term that the setter is looking out for. Now, here you will notice that we have made emphasis to exchange value. It is very, very important. Someone is willing to exchange money for a product. They're willing to give away that money because they think that it is worth the product that they're getting, or probably even more worth is the product that they're getting. For example, if someone wants to buy water, they will exchange money to get that water. But really, their value for that water could be more than the money that they are willing to give away. So it's an exchange value of a product. Sometimes it actually really means that the person who is exchanging this money is willing to give it away so that they are able to get in exchange that other product that is in another person's hand. And here we are also looking at another sample question, which says, give 3 methods of determining price in the market in an economy, or any economy out there. There are so many methods that are used to determine prices in the market in an economy. And one of those is market forces of demand and supply. Hopefully by now we have all been able to look at that, because that is among our very first initial topics in our microeconomics. The market forces of demand and supply actually help us to determine price in an economy. For many of those normal goods, if the demand is very high, then the price is likely to also be high. If the supply is low, the price is also likely to be high, depending on the forces of demand and supply. They help us to find an equilibrium and also to determine the price. Haggling and bargaining, you have seen hawkers on the street where you actually ask for something, and you as a customer, you're willing to pay less, while the person who is selling the product has an attached value to it, probably because of the sun, the scorching sun that they have stood under for the whole day. They want a little bit more. So haggling and bargaining is basically trying to negotiate. I think that would be another word that would be in that same line of bargaining and haggling, to negotiate a price where the consumer is willing to pay and the buyer is also willing to exchange for the fact that they're able to cover their cost of production. Auctioning, bidding, and tendering. I have just read something from the president of Kenya, the Republic of Kenya, saying he's going to be giving goods that are supposed to come to Uganda that have gone beyond 2 weeks at the ports. Remember, Kenya is not a landlocked country. They have access to the sea, and that gives them an advantage, a comparative advantage to Uganda, where we are a landlocked country. So many times our goods get locked up at the ports because we are not able to pay taxes in time. And so they are auctioned. And many times it's the Kenya population that get the advantage of it. They get to have the excess monies that come out of our goods, and then we are only compensated for the basic. And we sort of have been making a loss for a very long time. However, His Excellency, the President Ruto, is willing to give Ugandans a date as well when the auctioning is going to be happening, so that they're able to bid a price as well and not lose anything. So auctioning and bidding and tendering is about presenting the best that you can for a price and then be able to have it considered by those that are willing to give either more. Sometimes you can actually auction an item and even get more than what is in there for the purpose of the reason why you want to auction. I think many of you have attended wedding meetings where you're able to auction something in a box that is wrapped up in a very nice way. It could be a piece of soap, and you finally get so much money out of it. But the purpose is that they're able to contribute towards a good deed, which probably is a wedding or an introduction, and not necessarily the value of the product that is wrapped in there. Then sales by treaties, fixing price by agreement. This one I think we can see a lot, especially in our regional economics, where we are able to set a price and both countries are able to benefit out of it without one exploiting another. Price leadership is another way of setting price. Price legislation, which is price control. Price control is another way of having a monetary policy for a country where prices are really set so that we do not have challenges of running into an inflation state of the economy. So when the economy price is set, it can be for protecting the economy. It can also be for protecting people like the farmers so that they do not make a loss in cases where there is overproduction of perishable goods. Collusion, cartel arrangement is also another way of setting price where people come together in the cartel and they set and agree on a price. This can mostly be seen in people who deal in oil, people who are dealing in fueling. That can be one of the ways where they actually come together to set prices. And offers at fixed price also is another way of setting prices. And I think you'll see this when you go to barter shops. You're trying to look for a pair of shoes, and in every shop that you go to, the price has been fixed, regardless of the geographical place, regardless of the distance from the place where they are cleared from. So a fixed price can be set for most of those conglomerates. Those are different shops, but all dealing in those particular product. A fixed price so that the customer feels comfortable at every place, not to feel exploited. And then of course, resale price maintenance. These are all different methods of determining prices in the market in an economy. It could be any economy, it could be Uganda, it could be Kenya. These are some of the ways that we can actually set prices. Let's go to the next question. Next sample question here is list 4 determinants of a price of a commodity in an economy. What are those things that you said that you have to determine? This can be a very good question, but it can also be set in a very tricky way. They may ask you in a case scenario and ask you, you are, for example, a director of a school, and they're asking you, how do you set the school fees that the children have to pay? Now that is, of course, a service that is being priced, but again, you still go through the similar points that we're going to look at. Or they may tell you, you have started producing a line of shoes, a brand of shoes, and you have a good brand. Everyone is very excited about the quality. How are you going to set the price? Now, again, that's a question that is very similar to this. If they are asking you to list 4 determinants of price of a commodity in an economy, or just to ask you openly, how are you going to set a price for a product or a brand that you want to introduce in the market? So some of these are the answers that you would go through. And I have already explained that it can present itself in a different way, but at the end of the day, really the economic concept that they are looking for is price determinants. Price determinants, what are those things that you have to consider very seriously? Don't just go, don't wake up in the morning and just go, you've planted your maize and you just go to the market and just give it any price. No, you must have something that is informing you. What is informing you to actually make a maize cob to be 700 shillings, to be 1,000 shillings? Is it the number of pallets on it? Those things become very, very important. So it's like a customer will ask you, oh, why do you set this at 1,000? Why don't you give it to me at 500? You need to now have those determinants. So again, let's run through them. One of them is the cost of production. By the time you put this product onto the market, you have gone through several stages, right? You've gone through several stages. You have been able to, maybe the machinery, the labor force that you have put in, The ingredients that you use, the raw materials, you may be importing them. They may not be easily accessed in your country. All this really is part of what we call cost of production. Those costs of production are very important. The labor, the opportunity cost of producing that particular commodity to another, the capital, is it capital intensive, labor intensive? Those are very important, and they determine the price. You have to factor them in as you are trying to come up with a price. The objective, motive, goal of the producer. Sometimes you want to produce, for example, textbooks. And these textbooks, you want to give them out to as many learners as possible across the country. So you may not want to, you may be interested in, you may have a humanitarian motive. While another person may have a capitalist motive, they want to make money. And so the objective or the motive becomes very important. You're giving education as a service. You're interested in transforming the community, not so much that you have attracted all the children in this very up-end neighborhood, and so you take advantage of them and you price your services very high. So your objective and your motive is very important. That's why sometimes people will ask, what is your vision? What is your vision, madam? So your vision becomes very important there to determine what price you're going to set. Then with the degree of speculation, future market expectations, future price expectations, the degree of speculation. If you know that the price is going to fall very in the near future, you may want to make a small margin out of it before, depending on what kind of life cycle these products have. Some products have short life cycles, so you have to quickly get in and quickly get out. For example, all these things that are sold around Christmas time, you're selling jingle bells during Christmas time, doesn't have a very long life cycle. You know that you only have November and a little bit of December. Once Christmas is done, no one's going to be looking for your jingle bells until the next Christmas. So then you know your life cycle for that those particular products is a short one. So you get in, make the most out of it, get excited, get into the mood, get excited with everyone's excitement, price a little high, and then you are happy. You have a good Christmas with your good margin. So that is also another one, your speculation. The rate of inflation. The rate of inflation also can determine the price, level of demand for a commodity. What is and now again, the feature of a commodity. If it is one of those necessity goods, people can't do without them. Your setting of the price is probably going to be made easier for you. So the level of demand for a commodity, the level of supply of the commodity, quantity of the commodity produced. Again, this one also has a small minor factor of the raw materials. If the raw materials are not accessed easily, then supply is not going to be as regular, or is probably going to be challenged. And that may also be one of the reasons why you may have your price slightly higher, because no one is going to come into that market and go out and get maybe a cheaper raw material. They probably have to get it from where you get it, and the price will sort of be determined as well. Okay, someone's still saying the project, how is that? Is that better? If I increase it like that, would that make it a little better? Okay, the number of farms, level of competition in production, we talked about that. If someone gets their raw materials cheaper, or if they're able to get a substitute and get a cheaper raw material, they are probably going to be able to price lower than you. So the level of competition is also important. The quality of the commodity is also important. If your quality of the commodity, commodities that are coming in from, I'll give an example without bias, but some commodities that come from people like to distinguish them and say, oh, this shoe is coming from London, and this particular shoe is coming from China. So you know that when you put on the one of China, it is really cheap, but you may only use it for one or two functions. And then the one that is coming from London may be very expensive, but you know you're going to have it for so many years. So the quality of the commodity and the reputation of the brand can also determine the price, the level, stroke possibility of bargaining, and then finally the foreign exchange rate. Yes. When you're coming in from the US and you've come with your dollars, you may find that things are quite cheap here in the country. And yet when you go away to the US with your Uganda shillings, you may exchange it for a very small value out there. So the foreign exchange rate is also very important in setting the price. If you've been producing your commodities, but you have factored all your inputs in terms of dollars, then you may want to actually have a stable return by charging in dollars or an equivalent of it, so that you do not have very many differences in the value of your output in terms of money or in terms of gain. Okay, state two factors that may lead to an increase. State two factors that may lead to an increase in demand for a commodity in an economy. Now here we've given you a range of them. You can feel free. We will give you a recording and we shall also be able to give you this same handout so that you're able to look at it even more closely. The factors that may lead to an increase in demand may include increase in consumers' income. I think some of you who have access to phones, you have been able to see that gentleman. They only show the hand. When he's putting out his hand, he's very excited because it is salary time. I think even the season of when people get their salary end of month, that can also lead to an increase in demand of certain commodities. And he puts his hand very confidently on the table and he's talking to the waiter and he says, right now, I want a chenyanja and chicken. And it is an exciting one because they only show the hand and you can read from the picture that he's a very confident consumer. He has gotten into the restaurant and this time he's willing to pay cash and not to eat on debt. So increase in the consumer's income is very important. Season of salary payments is also very important. It can actually lead to the increase of demand. Increase in price of a substitute commodity, such you have to only run to this particular commodity because you have no choice. Decrease in price of a complementary commodity. A decrease in price of a complementary commodity can also lead to increase in demand of a particular product, okay? Because the complementary commodity has gone low. We'll probably give a small example. If the price of matoke goes really down, then someone will say, oh, let me buy myself a bunch of matoke. But it may also hit on the other side and increase the demand for maybe a good sauce to go with it. And so maybe meat may also find itself lucky as a complementary commodity to be increased. Yeah. Expectation of increase in price in future. If people can holding on to commodities, and remember we used to have that for those of you who are old enough, and I think most of you are way young, but in that time when the government had just switched and we had His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, coming to power, we used to hold on to commodities a lot. So when the sugar would show up, we would line up, the mother lines up, the father lines up on the other line, the big sister lines up on another line. You all line up so that you're able to get as much sugar as possible. The numbers in families were working for them at that time because they knew that the product was going to have an increase in price. You have seen when there's war in Kenya or there's a fear for war in Kenya and everyone knows that there's going to be an increase in the fuel prices, everyone gets to put some fuel somewhere in a shed just so that they don't run into a hiccup of fuel. So those are some of the examples that can fall in expectations of increase in price in future. Another is favorable change in season can lead to a consumption. For example, in winter, I'll give an example of winter. When it is winter, no one's going to buy summer thin clothes. Right now it is summer in the West world, and everyone is putting on shorts, putting on skimpy clothes. They just want to enjoy the sun. But you can't put that on when the winter comes. Here, when it becomes a rainy season, you can't just be, dressed up when you have sweaters. So it increases the consumption of buying neck warmers, those of you who are in the business of knitting neck warmers, that kind of thing. Sweaters, people buy sweaters a lot, and people buy umbrellas a lot when it is in population size can also lead to food. Increased income distribution becoming fairer, increased advertisement of a product, favorable change in tastes and preference of consumers, increased accessibility to credit facilities. The more you have credit facilities available for you, you can go to Pride Microfinance and borrow. Pride has put up a branch here, put up a branch right next to you, put up a branch behind you. Really, you have no option but to take the credit. So increased accessibility to credit facilities can also lead to a consumption increase of a particular product. Reduced taxation on people's income. Reduced taxation on people's income increases the disposable income of an individual, and therefore their propensity to expend also becomes quite higher. It's very important that when they reduce taxes on us, then they allow us to consume a little bit more. When the taxes are increased, then we hold on to our money a little more and we do not expend anyhow. Okay, let's go on to the next sample question, which says state the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, this is a question which we said last week would really fall in the lower order. It is quite direct. It's a direct question. It is not tricky for you to first of all think. And one of these days, in this last week, I asked my class that why do you think your setup is tricking you? Why do you think they're hiding the concepts? Why do you think they're making it a little hard for you to understand? And then one of my students said, because they want to confuse you. And then another student said, no, they actually want to check out your critical thinking skills. And I think I agreed with the second one more, that no setter or no examiner is really looking out to trick you. They really don't want, everyone wants you to pass. And when you pass, they're excited that they have done a good job and they're able to stretch you a little more. But they are actually looking for your critical thinking skills. So now these kind of questions like state the law of diminishing marginal utility, just wants you to state it. They want you to explain, doesn't want you to apply, doesn't want you to show it in an example where it plays out. It just wants you to state the law of diminishing marginal utility. So what does that mean? That one needs to know what the law of diminishing marginal utility, what it states. What it means should be at the back of your mind, but you need to know how to state it. What do we mean by saying that you need to know how to state it? You need to know some key concepts. You could define it in your own words, but that won't give you the full marks. So there are certain things that you need to know. For example, it states that as more and more units, underline the word units, of a commodity, underline the word commodity, are consumed. So we have units, we have a commodity, we have consumed. So units of a commodity are consumed, and the word as more and more. That means that there's a picture of increment, increase. They are saying that as more and more of a commodity is consumed, the satisfaction derived from each additional unit diminishes. You may start off when you're very hungry, and then they give you a Rolex. You're very happy with your Rolex. You eat it because you've spent 2 days without eating. You eat it, they give you a second one. You eat the third, the fourth. By the time you come to the fifth, you're like, I think I've had enough of these Rolexes. So you may eat half. They give you the next one, you may eat a quarter of it. So as more and more units of a commodity are consumed, the satisfaction derived from each additional unit diminishes. So you need to know those concepts that you have to be able to put so that your setter is convinced that you understood the concepts. And again, I don't want to limit you. If you're not able to understand or to put all those concepts, don't cram. It's better that you still reproduce it in the way you understand, because you may end up putting some concepts in the wrong place and it changes the whole meaning. The very first thing in economics is to understand and to reproduce it in a case scenario. Then later on, you are able to memorize. And the memorizing comes because you are consistent and persistent in your study of economics. So we shall go to the next one. Outline 3 limitations of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Again, outline, state, give. Those are lower order thinking skills. They just require you to know and reproduce, recall and reproduce. Don't give so much. You don't have to write so much about it because they've just said outline, just outline it, and then you're off. You move on to your next question. So the limitations of law of diminishing marginal utility include, number 1, existence of irrational consumers. The existence of irrational consumers will actually limit the law of diminishing marginal utility. There are some people who are irrational consumers, and they'll continue. I'll give an example of 2 young men that walked into a restaurant. And in this restaurant, they were, it was one of those restaurants where you pay once and then you sit, and then when you, that restaurant was counting on the law of diminishing returns. They knew that the consumers get tired after some time and they walk away. But these 2 young men, it's like they had been paid to prove the law of diminishing returns would not work. So they sat in the restaurant and they didn't move. And then the Indian at the counter was counting, and he was looking at his profit was not coming out because he was trying to manipulate the law of diminishing returns. But he kept seeing that at a certain point when his curve should be coming down, instead it was still shooting up. So he tried to what do you call it? Eliminate. He was eliminating table by table, and he finally caught up with the table where the 2 young men were, and he walked up to them and told them, please, profit little, little profit, profit little, business law. So irrational consumers can prove you wrong. Second, existence of a very small units of a product. Yes, if there's not so much, then you can't probably see it play out. Existence of changes in prices can affect that. You will not be able to see the law of diminishing marginal utility because it has probably had a different factor that has brought a change before it. And existence of a rare commodity as well. And then existence of changes in taste, fashion, and income of a consumer can actually also play out without necessarily the law of diminishing marginal utility coming through. Existence of very long breaks, time intervals during a consumption of a commodity. If the commodity has not been available and it has had a very long break, when it comes onto the market, everyone will be excited about it, and you may not be able to see the law of diminishing marginal utility. And then finally, it is not applicable to dissimilar units of a commodity. For example, not of the same size, shape, among others. So if a commodity has different ways it's presented, dissimilar units of a commodity, then it is not going to be applicable. They are talking about units, and the units should be identical. So each of those units then begins to play out. So if the commodity has dissimilar units of a commodity, then you're not able to see the law of diminishing marginal utility. Although if you have just taken an ophono of soda, you may want to take just a small size soda next And yet they are saying that you need to take an ofono and then again an ofono. So you may not be able to play it out with a similar unit taken one after another so that you're able to play it out. Then finally, it is not applicable for habitual commodities of consumption, that is alcohol, drugs, drug existence of a normal behavior of consumers. Some of those products have certain characteristics, and then they play on the body and the health, and then that is not a normal behavior of the consumer. And so we can't be able to study the law of diminishing returns or diminishing marginal utility because they have particular ways that they make the consumer behave. So they affect the consumer. You're not able to study the behavior of the consumer because alcohol intoxicates, drugs intoxicate. So the consumer may be knocked out, and yet you're trying to understand the behavior of a continuous consumption of equal units of a particular commodity. So these factors are above or rather below also begin to, those factors begin to eliminate the assumption that the marginal utility, diminishing marginal utility, plays with. We will now go to section B. We have looked at section A, and remember last week we said your section A paper is basically asking you to reproduce, to recall, and to state the concepts the way they have been taught to you. When you cross over to section B, then you begin to look out for application. You begin to look out for application of that has been given to you in section A. You're now looking at the application in the Ugandan context. You're looking at application in the regional context or international context. But of course, at this level, at secondary high school, we are mostly looking at the application at the Ugandan level. But as you continue as students of economics, I was telling my students last week, then you begin to interact with bigger markets out there. Your macroeconomics extends to region and also to international areas of space. Yes, so we shall look at section B here. And in section B, still again sample questions. We are looking at one of the sample questions. Distinguish between change in supply and change in quantity supplied. This is a common question that keeps coming and showing up in several papers and different years. How do we distinguish a change in supply? And how do we make a distinction between it and change in quantity supplied? So of course, one of them is responding to price, while the other one is just plainly other factors apart from price. The one that has other factors that are changing the supply could be, the one that has other factors that are affecting the change in supply is the first one, distinguish between change in supply. Change in supply is a situation where at a constant price, more or less of a commodity is supplied due to change in other factors that affect supply. Now, those other factors that affect supply could be factors like access to raw materials, could be changes in, it could be changes in political stability, so you're not able to get the product into the country. Those different factors will either cause you to have a supply of a commodity in its shortfall or in its increase. So it refers to an increase or decrease in supply of a commodity due to changes in other factors that affect supply, price of a commodity, while the price is constant. And in that graph over there, we're able to illustrate a change in supply. And we can see that the price is remaining constant for supply 1, supply 2, and supply 0. If you look at those different supply lines, you're able to see that they have changed and they're probably going to be giving a different quantity of the commodity, and yet the price still remains constant. So there are many other factors. It could be environmental. It could be depending on elections. For example, if Kenya is going to be electing their president, you'll probably not have fuel coming into the country for at least a week until when they are sure that they are stable. So those are some of the factors. And then, so we shall then look at now its other distinction, where we are distinguishing it against change in quantity supplied as a situation where more or less of a commodity is supplied due to change in its price, when other factors that affect supply are constant. So you have other factors remaining constant, but the price of the commodity changes, and that affects its change in the quantity that is supplied. So again, the distinction, you will see that one of them is affected by other factors, which is the change in supply, and then the one that is affected by change in price and other factors are constant is change in quantity supplied. And that's how it is demonstrated. Remember, previously, we were able to see that the supply lines are several. They just keep changing, but you can see that the price is constant, and the price being constant, yet the quantities are changing. So you can be able to change and decrease from A to C point or from A to B as an increase. But the price being constant and other factors are actually leading to a change in supply. And then in this other drawing, we're able to see that we have different quantities, amounts changing because of a change in the price, while other factors remain constant. So from this graph, you're able to see an upward movement of A to B, but you're also able to see a downward slope from A to C, indicating a decrease in quantity supplied of a particular commodity. So those are questions that keep coming back and forth, and we need to be able to understand them and study them. And in your discussion groups, try to discuss them. And I always encourage that try to have as many examples as possible from your environment scenario, or your community, or your market economy. The different small economies that are in your neighborhood should be able to teach you these different things. You're able to see how they play out. Factors that cause a change in supply of a commodity in an economy could be change in price of a competitively supplied commodity. For example, butter, cheese, an increase in price of a competitive supplied commodity leads to a fall in supply of the commodity in question, because it becomes more profitable to produce a competitively supplied commodity than a commodity in question, while a decrease in price of a competitively supplied commodity leads to an increase in supply of a commodity in question, because it becomes more profitable that way to produce a commodity in question than a competitively supplied commodity. And I think this one is clear, that if you have a commodity in question and its price goes high, then even the people who are dealing with that product in Chipogo don't make any margins out of it sell. So they are discouraged in selling that commodity or purchasing it and bringing it, because the consumers are preferring its competitively supplied commodity. And when the competitively supplied commodity shoots up, then you find that everyone in Chipogo will probably return and take up this commodity, because the consumers are always looking for something cheaper with the money that they have. And then change in price of a jointly supplied good, and then also change in cost of production. We talked about cost of production. If the raw materials are high, then it's going to affect the price. It's going to affect the amount that is going to be needed. So if there's a change in cost of production, then definitely this is going to lead to a fall in supply of the commodity, because of the reduced profit margin of the producers, while a decrease in cost of production will lead to an increase in supply of a commodity by producers because of increased profit margin. We have talked about that, and that is now very clear. You can see it play. Look at how the people in Chikubo manage. Are they going to buy Prestige, or they're going to buy Blue Band, or they're going to buy butter? Again, there are people who are going to prefer the butter. So you may not find the butter again a lot in Chikubo because of its features. You may find it more in the supermarkets where the up-end customers will take it. And again, it has its features that are going to cause it to be either the competitively supplied commodity or the commodity itself that is in question. We will now proceed to the change in goals of a farm or a producer, the change in state of technology. These are very important: change in natural factors, change in government policy on production. For example, we had second-hand books coming into the country for the purposes of empowering libraries. But again, many of you have also known that some of these books have come in with very wrong cultures and literature that is corrupting our young generation. So because of that, government has put a policy and has increased taxes, and that kind of a physical intervention has implications on how much is going to be coming into the country. But that is because they want to discourage that, and they want more local material to be printed with more local cultural contexts, so that you don't have a lot of foreign literature coming in and the children do not know anything about the local stories, but they only know fairy tales about Cinderella and the things that go along with it. So some of these policies that government puts in place is really to protect the people and the younger generation. So you read through those factors that cause changes, the factors that are going to be likely to cause and explain the change in the supply of a commodity of an economy. When you talk about technology, you're moving away from labor intensive and you're now moving into capital intensive. Then definitely you're going to have more supply onto the market in a faster way than if it was still dependent on labor intensive. The change in political climate, if the climate is a very attractive climate and very conducive for production, then you're going to have more people coming in who are going to be investors producing from here. So the amount of money that you'd otherwise spend to bring in the commodities that have been produced in Kenya, now they are being produced in Uganda, really you find that the supply of particular commodity is going to be enhanced. Let's continue to distinguish. And we are saying that distinguish between a balance of payments and terms of trade. Now, the balance of payment here is a difference of a country's receipts from abroad and expenditure abroad in a given year compared to other economies as well. Balance of payment is a systematic record of a country's receipts and payments in international transaction in a given year. Now, of course, this kind of question, when they are telling you to distinguish, you underline the word distinguish. Between, now that between is the key word. So that means you're distinguishing between, that means already you know that there are two concepts that are coming up for you. One of the concepts is balance of payments, and then the other is terms of trade. So now terms of trade is a ratio of price index of exports to price index of imports, the ratio of prices of the exports to the ratio of prices of imports. Sometimes we find ourselves when we are actually having so much more prices on the things that we are bringing into the country. And therefore, most of the money goes out and very little of our exports. One person one time gave a very interesting example. They were working with Ministry of Works, and they were saying that if you want to look at our price index, if you want to look at how much we are getting into the country, Then you look at the road from Kampala to Busia, and you see which one wears and tears out faster. You'll find that the one that is bringing in imports has more potholes than the one that is taking out any kind of traffic that is going out of the country to Kenya. That road takes long, that side of the road takes long to have repairs. Whereas the other road that brings in trucks, because there are so many trucks coming in on a daily, that road has more potholes. So that could be one of the images that you can carry with you and see that in the future, we have both roads being, disturbed for the good reasons, really, for the good reasons, so that we know that we are actually exporting. A good amount of exports are coming out of our country, so that we are able to have a good ratio of exports as compared to what we are bringing into the country. Okay, we'll quickly go. We are halfway, and feel free to write down your questions so that at some point we will be able to look at them and then explain them. This is one question, and I'll just talk about its keywords, its qualifiers, and also the concepts. And then we will be able to look at some of those answers. Examine is your qualifier. The causes is your keyword. And then balance of payments deficits in developing countries. So balance of payments deficits. Examine the causes of balance of payment deficits in developing country. And price of exports are extremely externally determined. Price of exports are externally determined. The buyers set low prices for exports, hence low export earnings. And that probably is because of the quality of production. We do not meet and we do not have a good quality of product. So we're not able, we lose our bargaining power. So our prices are set for us by the market out there. We need to work very, very hard to have good value addition on our products so that we are able to have a good negotiation power on setting our prices. Then also flooding of the export markets. This lowers the prices of exports, hence low export earnings. If all of you hit the market and you're all producing maize, you have done a good value addition to it, but because it is way too much and it is trying to cross to Kenya, it's going to be held at the border for 20 days for inspection. By the time it is done, your prices have really been unfairly dropped down. They have probably gone down because of the exposures that the maize is going to have. And again, flooding the export markets. Flooding the export markets means all of you are thinking the same thing. You have all done the same thing, done it the same way, packaged the same way, and then you hit the export market. Definitely, they are going to have to reduce you. And one of those examples can be sugarcane. Everyone wants to say sugarcane is really making good for this family. Then all the families in that particular district or that region are all going to be into sugarcane planting. And of course, when the sugarcane grows as a raw material, as an intermediate product, it then, when it is hitting the factories in and out of the country, because it has a flooding, it's going to be unfairly judged, and therefore you have low returns, hence low export earnings. Trade restrictions in the export markets, this limits demand for exports, which leads to a fall in their prices, hence low export earnings. You will find that people who come to the country say we have the best pineapples, we have the best bananas, we have the best, because our things are mostly organic. But then it becomes very hard for you to take them across the country, because once they hit the European market, they will cause a huge rush for them, and therefore their price restriction and controls, they are controlling the price of their commodities. Even if their commodities are GMOs or they are not having the same quality that we would otherwise give, they are interested in protecting their producers or their farmers. And so they put trade restrictions on our export markets so that You only travel to Uganda to eat the sweet banana, but the sweet banana does not find you in Canada, for instance. Exportation of low quality products. Many people spoil the market by taking low quality products. When everyone heard that Hass is a good avocado to export, everyone rushed into planting Hass. But there are some people who hit the market even when they know that their Hass plant has been attacked by a certain disease. They will still hit the market. And while others are careful, you also have the careless ones who also bring their products. And once those products get into the market on the other side, I'll give an example of beans. We had very good beans hitting the UK market until someone thought that they could sell their rotten beans. In the same way they exploit the market down here, they wanted to exploit the market up there. And it was embarrassing. Rotten beans coming from Uganda. Now that is a disservice because it kills the whole market. Exportation of low quality products is a very big disservice. Exportation of mainly primary products. Yes, we don't do a lot of value addition, so we send ill-processed products. Therefore, we can't bargain much. Importation of highly priced products. When we bring in very high, maybe raw materials or products that are going to work to get to a final product, prices become high, and therefore we are not able to gain much in exporting them. We will quickly go on to more causes, and those ones I'll leave you to be able to study so that we are able to finish in good time. But I'll probably explain the high marginal propensity to import. High marginal propensity to import. We are more likened into importing than exporting. So we prefer to import because we do not have the whole value chain of production. It makes it easier for us to bring in clothes from China than to produce them here. And therefore, because of that, we have challenges in our BOPs. I will quickly go on and look at the next slide. Distinguish between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Now, this is a very important one. The student is expected to know what monetary policy is about, and the student is also expected to know what fiscal policy is all about. So one of them is looking at managing the money issues, the credit facilities, anything to do with money issues is monetary policy, while the other one is looking at controlling the economy by looking at taxation. So in the monetary policy is a deliberate policy by government through the central bank to regulate the amount of money in circulation so as to achieve objectives of development, such as promoting price stability, promoting a stable economic growth rate, among others. So you know that the central bank determines the interest rate, and through this interest rate, the commercial banks are then able to regulate or indirectly regulating the amount of money that is going out because of the lending rate. So the lending rate determines how much money is going to be borrowed and how much of it is going to get into circulation. And when they want to reduce the money into circulation, then the lending rate is increased. So that's a monetary policy. It's one of those tools that the central bank or the government is going to use through the central bank to be able to regulate the amount of money circulating. If there's a lot of money in circulation, then they're going to increase the prices so that the consumption takes out the money in circulation. Now, fiscal policy has inclinations to taxes. Every time they say fiscal policy, you should think about URA. They are related. Fiscal policy is a deliberate policy where government uses its revenue, stroke taxation, and expenditure programs to regulate the level of economic activities. The level of economic activities, yes. So it's very important for you to know the distinct features of either policy and why government uses them. Why are taxes very high at this moment? Why is everyone crying tax increase? When you move to Kenya, everyone is crying about the tax policy and how it's taking out a lot of money or reducing the consumption of the people, the citizens. When you come to Uganda, everyone is crying taxes. There are a lot of innovations around taxes. You go to a supermarket, you have to pay tax for each of those commodities that you buy. You go to a shop, you have to pay taxes. They are now regulating and making sure that all avenues that are participating in the economy are all aligned to one system so that everyone knows. Yes. Okay. We will now proceed to another question which says, discuss the factors that limit the effective operation of monetary policy in Uganda. And one of them that has been given is high level of liquidity preference among the public. This is because many people do not take their money to commercial banks, and therefore the central bank cannot assess it when it wants to limit money in circulation. I think you've seen people who hide money in pillows, who have money in their rooftops, people who are holding on to money and they hold it on. So that can be a limiting factor for the effective operation of the monetary policy. You don't know how much money is in circulation. Underdeveloped money and capital markets. This is because the central bank sells securities to a few people, thus failing to reduce the money in circulation. People do not understand what stock exchanges are all about. They do not understand what securities is all about. When you have a security in exchange of money, so they hold on to your money as a fixed deposit for some time in form of a security and take the money to represent that and give you an interest that can add to that. So these underdeveloped money and capital markets, which are not explained to the people properly, and the people do not perceive them in good faith, so they shy away from those. So that also limits on the instruments that the monetary policy would otherwise use. Again, that okay, we shall continue to the next slide, which says distinguish between trade creation and trade diversion. Again, this is a question that is calling you to distinguish between the two economic concepts. The first economic concept is trade creation. The next is trade diversion. So trade diversion is the shift in the locus direction of trade by a country from low-cost non-member countries to high-cost member countries in economic integration. Trade diversion, a shift in the locus. While trade creation is a shift in locus, direction of trade by a country from high-cost non-member countries to low-cost member countries in the economic integration. Again, economic integration is on a macroeconomic scale where you're trying to look at how different economies come and integrate and work together to trade off and to be able to benefit from the economies of scale. When countries come together, they are actually benefiting from the economies of scale. And we are now asked to describe the conditions necessary for a successful economic integration. We'll look at one of them. These are what we call condition questions. Remember last time we talked about condition questions and we said condition questions are basically trying to look out for a good environment where a particular case scenario would thrive. If it is price mechanism, they'll ask you for why is it necessary to have price mechanism or to study it. They're looking at the conditions necessary for the success of that particular scenario. What are the conditions that are necessary for a perfect competition market structure? They want you to look at the factors that favor market competition to thrive. So here, this question is a condition question that is asking us to look for the success conditions that are necessary for the success of economic integration. Once again, I said this is when two economies come together to be able to trade off with good proceeds from their coming together. When they come together, they aggregate demand, they aggregate consumption, they put their energies together, their synergies. So one of those is that there should be a political stability in the region so as to avoid disruption of investment in the member states. The second is intending member states should be in the same region or share common borders, geographically proximal of these member states, to minimize the cost of transporting goods among member states. Remember, they are putting their synergies together, they're enjoying good economies of scale, so they don't want to lose out so much. So you may not have Nigeria, which is very far, enjoying an economic integration with, say, for example, Tanzania in preference to Uganda, because Tanzania and Uganda are in proximal radius. They are likely to have a better trade-off than a further country. Countries should also have similar political ideologies so as to have common economic policies. Of course, political ideologies, I know political ideologies would be, one may be a dictatorship, the other could be multi-party. So if it's multi-party dictatorship, their policies are also likely to be different. And therefore, those two countries may be challenged to have and enjoy a successful economic integration. Then, intending member states should be relatively at the same level of development. So that one does not look like they are pulling from another or exploiting another. Some people may say, these people are taking our electricity, they are developing faster than us. So that at some point, it starts to become a challenge on the integration when one nation thinks that the other is exploiting it for its own benefit. So they should be seen to be at the same level of development. Yes, and it continues with those points. I'll quickly go on to the next. Discuss benefits of economic integration. We've probably looked at them. And then we will also look at another that says increase resource. That is still discussing the benefits of economic integration. You need to look at them. We shall give you the presentation. Distinguish between employment and unemployment. That means that the student should know employment and the student should also know unemployment. Those two concepts must be known and must be very comfortable for the learner. Okay. Discuss the advantages of employment in an economy. This is a very likely question to show up because it is one of the problems that we grapple with as a developing country, unemployment. So one must be very keen at some of these problems because remember, we are looking at future leaders to solve problems and challenges. So these kind of questions are likely to show up more often than less. Okay, account for unemployment problem in developing country. Now, this is a very good question. It is asking you to account for the unemployment problem in developing countries. Now, what this question is trying to say is that, can you tell us, okay, when they say, can you account for the money that we gave you this term? And you have to sit and say, oh, I photocopied notes, or I bought some Grab, or I had no shoes, so I had to buy some shoes. You're making a case for your expenditure. Now, right here, when they say account for unemployment problem in developing countries, they are saying, can you make a case for these developing, for this unemployment? Can you tell us why there's unemployment? Why is unemployment related to developing countries? Can you make an accountability about that? And so that is the good question, interpretation, and it has many, many, many answers. You need to be able to tie and identify with them. So finally, we will then take it on to theories. And theories, I would encourage you to look at all the different theories that we have probably been able to see, or probably not even been able to see, but you will see that you have so many theories that you are going to have in your syllabus, the examinable, examined theories that are going to be quite accessible to you. For example, the Rostov stages of economic growth, Rostov's growth. Yes.
Yes, can I first try to share from this side and we swear that it becomes bigger?
Okay, please.
Members, you can tell us in the chat. Teacher Flavia, can we proceed?
Okay. So, like I said, you have the theory of balanced growth, theory of unbalanced growth, theory of the Keynesian theory, Malthusian theory, Rostov. All those are the different theories that we are likely to rub shoulders with, explain them, understand them, but also be able to critique them, because some of them, like we said the other time, are not very applicable. For example, the Keynesian theory of unemployment ceases to explain the situation in developing countries. So those are going to be very important features for you to be able to understand. So again, we shall quickly go to theories, and we are now going to look at the Malthusian theory of population. But like I have explained previously, there are many other theories, about 6, 7, 8 theories that you need to be able to understudy and also be able to critique them and see whether they apply or they do not apply. Now, these are theories, some of them that have been as early as 1930. They are trying to explain a particular economic scenario. They're trying to explain and see if it is predictable. But can you be able to predict a future economic challenge using a theory that was explained maybe, for example, in 1930? Probably so many things that have changed between now and 1930. And therefore, some of those criticisms are going to come out of irrelevance. They are not relevant. They are not relevant as compared to what was at that time. They worked for them. One of our examiners was talking to some of his students recently, and he was saying, you cannot be using references of textbooks that were produced in the 1950s when we have textbooks that are as recent as 2021. And he had a point, because the textbooks that were produced at that time, yes, they may have some, maybe still good information that we can borrow from, but the environment that they were produced in, the conditions, the circumstances, the population size, the aggregate demands at that time, the variety of commodities that were on the market are way different. The digital presentations that bring marketing on phones, way different. The cost of advertisement, there's so many things that have changed. Therefore, you can't rely on information that was produced in 1930. And maybe some of those are the theories that we have our way. Malthusian theory of population. Now, in this, you have to know how to state the theory. You have to understand what was the problem and what they were trying to explain, okay? I know that Malthusian theory, back in my sociology class, was also a famous one because of the sociology of population, the demographic sociology. And we enjoyed it because it basically tries to predict that once you have an overpopulated planet, then there are other factors that begin to work on it. So one would ask things like, would COVID-19 be one of those mechanical things that work on the population? Those are questions for us to think about and to sharpen our critical thinking skills. The theory states that whereas population grows at a geometric rate, food supply grows at an arithmetic rate. This theory states that there is a point in time known as the population trap, when population growth equals food supply. But beyond this population trap, food supply would not be enough to sustain increasing population, leading to misery, suffering, and death because of the shortages. And I think this theory is very, very critical for us because it's talking about food. You know that life depends on food. If the food is being struggled for, then of course, there's going to be death, suffering, and misery. And I just want to digress a little bit just before I go and explain the Malthusian theory as an illustration. And I was attending the Sacramento Sacramento Symposium. And this Sacramento Symposium has an agreement between Sacramento people who live in Sacramento, California, and the people of the Republic of Uganda. And a number of people, stakeholders, came on board. Most of them are investors. But one of the investors that was very, very, that tried to explain this theory of Malthusian theory brought a very interesting scenario. He said in his presentation, and I must say he was an investor that was in the food value chain, because he was bringing in big machines. This is a big factory, not factory, but tractors with huge horsepowers that have potential of farming 200, 300, 500 acres of land. Those are huge machines. And because he knew that Uganda is one of the most arable countries in the world, Uganda has the potential to feed Africa if we had very intentional policies, because we have good weather, we have good soils, we still have fairly good soils, and we have good weather, and we can be able to use our advantage to be able to have very good proceeds. But he said, which was very interesting, he said, if people fought for toilet paper, now not the word toilet paper, if people fought for toilet paper during COVID-19, how much more food? And he comes from a country which is called the United Arab Emirates, which is really Dubai, I think, United Arab Emirates. This particular investor was actually saying that if people could fight for toilet paper during COVID-19, how much more food? And he said that the food war is coming, and indeed it is coming. We all know the population statistics of our planet, that they are going so high. Actually, the statistics of our planet show us that we have half of the population of the world that has ever lived ever since the creation time. Now you can imagine the age of the earth and how many people have lived, billions of people. We have about 17 billion people on the planet right now, but then the statistics say that this population of 17 billion is half the population that has ever lived. Now that's a huge statistic. And of course, this has implications on food, but not only food, even consumable water. And I would like to encourage you in your free time and when you have time to look at those kind of statistics. Look at them. Consumable water means regarding the vast amount of water that you see in the ocean. There's what is called consumable water, that is human consumption. That becomes very, very important for us to be able to know. And the Malthusian theory is becoming significant in that, because it's talking about the population vis-a-vis the food production. Now the Arabs are coming in and they are planting food. And he said, for us, we are already preparing for the food war. Now, my dear economists on call, I don't know whether we understand when we say food war. Food war is related to Malthusian theory. Are we ready for the food war as a country or as a nation or as a continent? Because Africa remains the redeemable land to feed the rest of the world with a very small population and very great land. But are we ready for it? The Dubai population is being fed on food here. Recently, yesterday, I had a guest that was coming into the country and he told me he bought a small bottle of water. What you buy here at 500 shillings. 500 shillings of water, this ice bottle, or whatever different brands are on the market. You buy it at 500 shillings, Uganda shillings. And for him, he was being asked in Dubai to pay for it at $7, not 7 billion, $7. Now, $7 times 3,800, make it 4,000, is about 7 times 4 is about how much? That's about 14 plus 14, that's 28,000 shillings is being exchanged for a bottle, and that war is getting closer to us. We buy a bottle at 500 shillings, and in Dubai, it's being sold at 28,000 shillings. And they can buy it, and they are living happy because they have oil. But they have their land predominantly as desert. So they have come to Uganda, and they are in the north or wherever they are, and they are planting rice, packaging it very well, taking it back to the markets out in the world and selling it very expensively. Their marginal profits are high, and we are still sleeping. So Malthusian theory becomes very significant. We shall now go on to the next slide that has an illustration of the Malthusian theory. And we are saying the population growth, as you can see, population growth is really skyrocketing and going up. And we can also see that the food growth has an arithmetic growth. And at some point, there's a match and an equilibrium, but at a point, we have Malthus suggesting that there was a need to control population through preventive negative checks like moral restraint, late marriages, and celibacy. Otherwise, positive checks like deadly pestilence, wars, famine, and diseases would serve to reduce population growth, and then population would then drop back and equal to food supply. So someone says that maybe the manufacturer of COVID-19 was a response to one of these. Until it is proven that it was intentional, it's not something that you can reproduce in your exams. You'll be penalized. Some of these things need critical evidence, but we know that there's an intentional malice of manufacturing diseases that are supposed to aim at controlling population growth. In Uganda, a good example would be family planning, where you have so many donors that have invested so many dollars to see that the population growth of the country is curbed. You know very well that Uganda has one of the highest fertility rates in the world. And Kasese, at some point, as a geographical area in Uganda, was cited to be one with the highest fertility in the world, with 9 children average per woman of reproductive age. That's very high. And that also spells a lot. If you look at the population pyramid of the country, that's also another area that I would encourage you to go and study. Looking at the population pyramid of the country, you find that the base of the population, if you say 15 to 0 years, may actually make for you a population of almost 64% of the total population of probably 50 million Ugandans. That's huge. And of course, the population structure also speaks a lot on the economy's health as well. You have more people going into school and very few people out of school, and therefore you have a highly dependent population. So of course, good measures, civic good measures, and I would underline the word civic and moral restraints to increase in population become a suggestive moral way of taking the population growth curve to normalcy, or to be in a fair, good ground with the food production, and away from those that are really evil. Yeah, so that is basically it. Let's go to the next slide, which is saying assess the relevance of Malthusian theory of population in developing countries. You will look at those and study them. We have had a good ground of it. Land is fixed in supply and subject to the law of diminishing returns, especially when you have increase in population. A good example case scenario would be areas like Bududa, which is in Mbale, with the highest population density on land. In Bududa, you get to buy land more expensively than it is in Kampala, more expensively. You buy land, a small piece of land there, quite more expensively than you would buy it here. In Kabale, again, is another example of an area that is with a very high population density, and yet land is fixed in supply. Natural family planning methods are being used, and they are his initiation. Now, it's very important for us to understand about family planning methods and how they're being used or encouraged for young, productive families to space children. Spacing of children is an idea that comes from Malthusian theory of population growth. Positive checks on population such as famine, wars, deadly pestilence, epidemics, and diseases exist in developing countries. Those are some of the relevancies. That is how you can actually relate with the Malthusian theory. Land disputes problems are common phenomena in developing countries. Again, that is another area that you can use to explain. And then let's go on to the next slide. And then we should be done in the next slide. So here we are saying, however, the theory is limited in relevance. And again, that's what we said. It is important for you to critique all these theories that have been given to you. It's very important for you to be able to critique them. And this is how it has been critiqued. I'll spend a little bit of time here. The theory assumes constant technology, which is unrealistic since technology is ever changing. Yeah, technology is ever changing. So that's a bit unrealistic. So maybe you can say, yes, we are producing food from land. That's the traditional way of doing it. But now technology has come in place, and you have all seen that there's something called plastic rice or plastic eggs. There's so many things that are coming in because of technology. And that also begins to take us into a different path of argument. The second is it assumes a closed economy, yet economies of most developing countries are open. It ignores the role of international trade. So yes, you may be struggling with land, you may be struggling with food supplies, but there's food that is probably going to be coming in because of imports that are coming in from another country. So that can also be a challenge in explaining the Malthusian theory. The theory did not foresee the possibility of getting foreign aid resources from other countries. Right now, Russia is giving free grain to North Africa because it has destabilized its grain consumption from Ukraine that has been under war with Russia. So you see that there's quite a number of scenarios there that we can borrow from. And if this is one of the challenges that war can actually lead to a challenge of misery and dying and hunger, well, then what Russia is doing is actually trying to critique or to underplay the assumptions that the Malthusian theory comes with. And then finally, the theory failed to visualize labor mobility to ease population pressure from crowded areas to areas with low population. This is very, very important. You know that in the West, the population structure is not a pyramid, but it's an upside down pyramid where you have the elderly as the smallest percentage. You have the elder as the biggest percentage, which is different from developing countries. For example, Uganda, you have the elderly as the smallest part of the pyramid, but the bigger part of the pyramid upside down is the elderly. So people are migrating from Africa. People are going to Italy. People are going to all these different countries that have very, very few people out there, and they need labor. They need people to do the work. So this theory failed to visualize this kind of labor mobility. Some countries have only one child, and some others are not even having children. And they are, many things are happening in the world. So Africans are moving. The theory did not foresee great improvement in transport so as to increase food supply when the need arises in areas of food shortages. Yes, we have food that is being airlifted from Kampala or from wherever and is being taken to war-ravaged areas. And that kind of great improvement in transport was underplayed by the theory. I would like to end here and begin to ask for questions, interactions, submissions. I know there are very many people on call who probably have 1 or 2 or 3 things to add. That would be very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teacher Flavia, for the wonderful presentation. I'm very sure children have gained a lot, and kindly, in case you have any question, ask. Raise up your hand, ask. You can use the chat to ask your question. Yes. Any questions? Okay, I think the presentation has been very clear. We are going to be sharing with you the slides that she has used for presentation, such that the teachers can refer to them, such that also you can as well be able to access them. Please take into, please be very careful when it comes to theories, like she has told us, explain, have the why part, the how part, state your points very well, and everything. So, okay, so we want to thank Teacher Flavia so much, and let me first ask her to give her concluding remarks, and maybe, okay, before we go, Teacher Flavia, there is a question. Yes, Mr. Alfred Olinga. Unmute. Alfred, unmute.
Am I clear now?
Yes, very clear.
Yes, please.
Okay. I was saying thank you to Madam for the presentation. I started following from section A. Only that network disturbed me a bit, and some parts of question A I did not pick. I don't know whether I can access to question part A, I mean section A.
Yes, please, Alfred.
Yes.
Yes, please. The presentation will surely be shared.
Okay. It's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm done with mine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think Teacher Flavia, we can have the concluding remarks, and then we end.
Okay, I would like to thank you very much. I can see there's a question that is coming in from Kakira Secondary School, and they're saying, to what extent have trade unions achieved their objectives in Uganda? That's a very good question. And I would like to encourage each one of us to go out and look for it, because I think you have very interesting answers. First of all, they are looking at to what extent. Once you see a question that says to what extent, it means that there's been some good mileage covered, but there've also been some challenges as well. So to what extent are you going to finally conclude? Is it to a large extent or to a fair extent?
Pack it together.
Or to a low extent. So to what extent is calling for you to be able to show both sides, whether we have been able to achieve our agenda or we have not been able to achieve our agenda. So you need to look at the objectives of trade unions. Please look back at your concepts and see what are the objectives of trade unions, and then be able to discuss along there. You will not go very far from economic integrations, because trade unions are, again, an avenue for us to be able to come and aggregate our demands and be able to have good conditions for us to trade with one another, they're able to put our fiscal policy in good control to protect both countries that are in this union. So these are some of the things that you need to be able to discuss. Is it a must to write a leading statement while answering a question? Well, if it has a concept that has been put in, it's important, it has been put into the question, it becomes important for you to first of all explain the statement, the leading statement, so that you're able to show your examiner that you are from the onset, you are on the right path to answering the question. My question, why do low developing countries prefer deficit financing to taxation financing? Yes. Why do low developed countries prefer deficit financing to taxation financing? This means that you need to be able to understand what deficit financing is and also taxation financing. Of course, low developing countries, one person one time said in a presentation that the reason why the countries or the third world countries remain poorer and poorer while the West remains richer is because they have put heavy taxations on us, heavy taxations at every point. Even the loans that are being given have huge taxes on them, have huge interests that have to go on them. So of course, developing countries preferring deficit financing to taxation financing is more because we gain more, a little bit more with deficit financing than when we have to remove all the revenue by being taxed. And of course, you have to look at the definition of deficit financing, but also look at what it brings on table as compared to what taxation and the challenges of taxation, especially in regard to low developing countries. Low developing countries can also be called the global south, and how we compare to the other global north. This is another question that's coming in from Kakira. Is it necessary to explain when asked the relevance of any theory? Yes. Again, explanation is more like your introduction. In your explanation, you're able to show that you have understood the concept from the onset. The PowerPoint presentation has been put and placed there for you. Please take time to download it before the Zoom is closed, because the Zoom will close along with it. Download it and then be able to send it to your phones or to your gadgets that you're using. It will only take you about a minute or less. I would like to make my concluding remarks as you download the presentation and say thank you very much, and I wish you all the best in your exams, in your mocks. I'm sure we shall have more of these interactions in the term that follows this term. For now, have a successful exam, be confident, and remember, we are encouraging collaborative learning. Learning as an individual and having study times is to mostly reflect on what you have understood as a group, but never underestimate the power of group discussions. It is what is being promoted as a global skill. You will find it in every economy that you probably interact with. Collaborative learning is 2 heads are better than 1. I'd like to end there and wish you a good evening.
Thank you so much, Teacher Flavia, for the wonderful presentation. We are really very grateful for having taken us through this presentation. We are so happy. Thank you so much for sharing with us your knowledge of economics and also for the guidance you have given to us. We are really very grateful. Jacob, let us ask you to have your question put in the chat. We want also to thank all the teachers that have been on this call. Thank you so much for joining. We want to thank the students that have been on the call from 4:30 up to now. Thank you so much, and we always pray for you that the Almighty God blesses you and also to help you understand everything that you learn such that at the end of the day, you may come out as victors. We want to thank you so much, and we want to wish you success in your forthcoming exams. Those who have already started their mock exams, we are praying for you that things go on well as expected, and that they reflect all the efforts you have been putting on right from the start. Today, I think this has been our last session for economics this week. We shall have other sessions once teacher Flavia gives us a timetable, but that will be after your mock exams, because we want us to be well prepared for your name. So after your mock exams, we shall have the same similar sessions such that we can be able to interact, to collaborate, such that at the end of the day, we win and come out very successful. So once we go back for the holiday, we shall keep using the same links. These are the same links we shall use also in the holiday, such that we can interact. And maybe in the holiday, teacher Flavia will come up with the map work we shall be following. Probably we can have it in topics or in different topics, such that by the every time we meet, there is something we can be in position to cover. But we want to thank you so much. We want to thank the teachers that are supporting, but also I want to remind the teachers on the call that tomorrow we shall be having a session starting at 2 p.m. And that session will be presented by Professor Pado from USA, and it will be about the STEM learning and teaching. Please have it on your program that tomorrow we have that session that will start from 2 to 4, and then from 4:30 onwards, we shall have another session. We want tomorrow, we shall have ICT. If at all I'm not mistaken, yes, we shall have ICT, and then on Friday we shall have applied mathematics. We want to thank you so much, and we want to wish you a good evening, and thank you to everyone. Bye-bye.